You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Well, I promised you a packed show today. And boy, have we had it so far, and it's only going to get better. Because we're going to move over towards Virginia, where we have not spent any time, and we have a lot to learn. Happily, Carolyn Fiddler is joining us. She covers state politics and is focused on Virginia for the dogwood in Virginia. But, you know, she's also one of the best observers of state legislators around the country, a topic you know we talk about a lot. So she has seen the promise of, like, you know, better days on offer in, I don't know, Minnesota and the dark tragedy in Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, Florida, you name it, places like her own state of Virginia. Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you.
So I love that I saw your Substack newsletter, the week in State House action.
I'm a little out of date. I've had a lot going on. I recently moved, so I'm a little behind. But that doesn't mean I'm not paying attention to what's going on very closely, which I very much am. A lot of bad things keep happening everywhere.
Yeah, and some good things. But I love that you're paying attention.
Some good things.
You know, this week I spent a lot of time on state legislators and this show, whether it's the sort of disastrous privatization of schools in Arizona and now recent efforts with the Democratic governor to limit the damage, or the amazing things Michigan has done, or the moving from defense to offense in Wisconsin. You know, but we haven't had a chance to talk about Virginia on this show at all. So I'm excited to start there with you.
Me too.
And I mean, Virginia's just different, right? I mean, it's a weird state in that, like, every seat in both chambers in the legislature, every seat is up this year, right?
Yep, all 140, 100 in the House, 40 in the state Senate.
Yeah, most states don't do it that way. They usually stagger terms so that there's some continuity, right? And the primary season's already begun there.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Every every race with more than one Democrat running, they all opted for the state-run primary on June 20th. Some Republican primaries are happening on June 20th, but a lot of Republicans opted to nominate through, less small d Democratic means. They opted for, like, firehouse primaries or conventions, which just by their very nature draw fewer voters, which is unfortunate for, democracy. But that's, everyone gets to decide how they want to choose their own party's nominee, and that is how it works, and that is okay.
Yeah, for those of us in the upper Midwest where we don't have that quite a system, what you're talking about is just there are different ways parties can nominate, and it's not just primaries. Yes. They can actually opt for some other methods.
They have local conventions, which are just like statewide conventions, just much smaller, or they have what they call firehouse primaries, which are basically sort of a period of hours over the course of a day where people can just show up and cast their ballots at a few locations in a district. But again, because fewer places to vote, less time to vote than on a normal state-run primary day, means fewer people are available to participate in the process. But anyway, you're right. The process is underway. A lot of Republican nominees have already been selected, and even though during the General Assembly session earlier this year, Republicans tried very, very hard to stay away from the issue of reproductive rights, and no one else is paying attention. The governor keeps talking about how he wants to ban abortion at 15 weeks, and abortion keeps coming up in these primaries. On the Republican side so far, Republicans saying that they are harder on abortion than their opponent is very much an issue in this year's elections. Reproductive rights are very much on the ballot in Virginia this year.
Yeah, Virginia's going to be so important, and I guess you're going to get a lot of attention. I mean, it's I think still a purplish state, or it is. I mean, or a red and blue state with no mixing. I can't really tell.
I would argue that, a lot of people were saying it was blue. I would always argue it was never as blue as a lot of DC pundits claimed it was. And then 2021 was a rude awakening to a lot of people. It was not a huge shock, but I think gradually Virginia is definitely getting bluer as long as I've been involved in politics there, which is longer than I care to admit, but it's definitely getting more progressive. But calling it a blue state is incorrect at this point, for sure.
Well, I know that our Washington pundits get many things wrong, and maybe they get Virginia more wrong than most because they can. What was it that Sarah Palin said? They can see it from their backyard. It's like
that's exactly
it's
right. Oh,
it's right there, but the little piece they see is not quite the whole state.
Right, they see Northern Virginia, which is very much not representative of the state as a whole, which I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Virginia, and it's a very different place than Northern Virginia, for sure.
Yeah, Northern Virginia is suburban Washington, D.C., so let's be honest.
Exactly
it's
right.
not.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so the whole state, so your governor, Glenn Youngkin, wins an election over a former governor, and the country flips out thinking it's a huge change. I think that your former governor did not run a very good campaign. And
he
that
did
was
not.
part of it.
I have so much affection for Terry as a human, and he did a great job as governor when he was governor. But you're right, that campaign was not executed in a way that would produce a victory, and it did not for him. And Youngkin was, had a great opportunity presented to him with parental frustration after the pandemic, and he just capitalized on it, like just really effectively. And I gotta give him props for that, even though I disagree with everything he stands for. So.
And this post-pandemic frustration of parents, I think, has led the GOP into enormously dangerous territory for them, but for all of us, really, as
Agreed.
Opponents of public education broadly.
No, definitely. They were like, oh, homeschooling, everyone experienced it, and then everyone realized it's very difficult, but it gave parents a window into education that they did not have previously. And during the pandemic, during the lockdowns, people were very, very scared, and being scared is not fun. So it's much easier to get angry or upset or to direct your fear and general poor demeanor at something that is not you or what's going on in your vicinity. You direct it at schools or whatever is making you mad today. It's just much easier than sitting around and feeling scared and feeling worried and uncertain and not knowing what the future will bring. So Youngkin tapped into that so effectively, and Republicans are trying to, but that moment has passed, and they just have gone so hard into culture war things that no one else really cares about. Like, they're going after drag shows, and RuPaul's Drag Race is one of the most popular shows on TV. They just don't understand what's going on in America.
So in the Virginia legislature, have they, like other Republican legislatures, have they gone, abortion, guns, gay rights, the democracy itself? Are they following that playbook that's being executed in a lot of states?
Well, they might, but they can't because when Youngkin won the governorship in 2021, Republicans narrowly flipped the state house from Democratic back to Republican control. But Democrats still had majority control of the state Senate. So that keeps really extreme things from passing in Virginia. And even because it's an election year, the Republican leadership in the state House, where Republicans have majority control, they wouldn't even debate any abortion bills on the floor. They would not schedule any of those bills for debate in committee even, because they are afraid. They saw what happened in 22. They are terrified of reproductive rights being on the ballot this year, which it very much is. So they wanted to not talk about it. They wanted to keep Republicans from having something, hanging around their necks like a big old anti-choice albatross. And so they try to keep their members from voting on it, but it's coming up in primaries. It's going to be a major issue on the campaign trail this year, and as much as Republicans were afraid of it, they wouldn't even debate it. They wouldn't even, not just vote on it, they would not even consider it in the House, because Republicans know it's a losing issue for them, not just in Virginia, but everywhere, but including Virginia.
And your governor is dancing with the idea of positioning himself such that if Mr. Trump is in jail and can't run for president, that he might be available. Might be available as a softer version of Ron DeSantis.
That's exactly right. He wants to be a likable Ron DeSantis, even though he doesn't know how to be that bad. Like, honestly, Glenn Youngkin, bless his heart, he is not the cleverest tool in the shed, to mix metaphors. He wants to keep himself in the conversation. His PAC released an ad this week that notoriously involved image of the Italian military as opposed to, American. But he wants to be a part of the presidential conference. Yeah, he released an ad this week that had military imagery in it, but it turned out to be of folks in Italy. They re-recorded it and re-released it, but oh well. No, he wants to be a part of the conversation. He wants to be a big fish, and he doesn't understand that he is a bit of a one-off. In Virginia, I don't think I've watched a lot of politicians come and go through Virginia over the years. I don't think he has a real future in politics. Famous last words. I know I just jinxed myself, but I am not convinced this guy has a huge future in politics.
Yeah,
you can't run for re-election in Virginia because,
right.
Well, in Virginia, Virginia has this weird thing where you can run for re-election, but not for consecutive terms, which is how Kerry ran for re-election last go round. But so it's hard. It's hard to make a big impact, and you have to go really hard out of the gate if you want to do it as a governor in Virginia. And Glenn Youngkin didn't know how to do that, but he's trying his best.
Are Democrats organized in Virginia as they are in Michigan and Wisconsin, and now trying to be in Georgia? In North Carolina, and are in Georgia. Are Democrats organized in Virginia?
That's a really great question. Yes, they are very well organized in Virginia. There have been some leadership turnovers in the legislature and in those committees that elect state legislators, but there are also a lot of really active and just really well-connected groups in Virginia now that are doing a lot of this on-the-ground, like deep canvassing, a lot of voter outreach that is completely separate from the state party and whatever sort of, upheaval the caucus might be having. There are a lot of groups in Virginia that really, a lot of them came about just before or shortly after Trump got elected. His election was obviously terrible, but it did galvanize a lot of progressives to get their acts together in ways they hadn't before. And those groups are still doing really good work in Virginia, and they're going to be real difference makers in this year's elections there for sure.
Carolyn, I think that what happened on the Democratic progressive side of America after Trump's election was nothing short of a miracle. The numbers of, starting with the Women's March, right, which was the biggest turnout in the history of our country, and then just fabulous organizations, whether it's Swing Left or the National Democratic Training Committee, just infrastructure that people said, I'm not waiting for the parties. We're just going to get organized. We will work with local parties everywhere. And to their credit, in some states, the local parties have really upped their game. But people have just said, you know what, Republicans may have had a 20-year organizing advantage, but in 5 years, we are going to catch up. And sure enough, all over the country, Michigan fixed, Wisconsin possibly, one of the worst places for Democrats in the country, on its way to coming back. North Carolina, new energy right now, organizing in all 100 counties. I just think we are, the ordinary citizens have said, quit bullying us.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. No, as someone who's been paying attention to state politics, way before it was cool, it was so heartening after 2016 to see all these groups pop up and suddenly want to start working on state legislative races and caring about these down ballot elections, not just state leg stuff like school boards and everything else. And it's been amazing to see. And not all these groups lasted. A lot were just we're angry, we want to do something, but a lot have lasted or morphed or been rolled into other organizations. And there's more passion, more excitement, more just people paying attention to state legislative races now than I have ever seen, and it's very cool. It's going to be a long decade too. We just went through a round of redistricting, and you were just talking about North Carolina. We're going to go through another round there, which is going to make North Carolina even worse than it is now somehow, but it will happen. But we were at the beginning of the decade. We just went through a round of redistricting. So the thing about redistricting, yes, Republicans controlled it most of it this time around. Not as much as they did last decade, which was devastating for Democrats at the state level and Congress for the same reason, redistricting. But we are here now. This is the beginning of the redistricting decade. Is always a nadir for the party out of power. Like, Democrats are in not a great place now because Republicans controlled so much redistricting. But the thing is, over the course of a decade, people move, patterns change, and because Republicans gerrymander so hard when they don't actually have majorities in these states, these gerrymandered districts actually are more fragile than they seem on paper over years. It's going to take a while, and this is not sexy talk because we're talking 6 years away, but these seats will become more Democratic over time. So, check with me in a little while, and it'll be a different conversation in some of these states.
Yeah, and in some, we have a hope in Wisconsin that the new Supreme Court will deem the maps that exist unconstitutional, and we may not have to wait 6 years. But I agree with you. In most states, it's a disaster, and it's going to stay that way for a while.
Sometimes when I get sad, I think about the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race, and I get happy again. It makes me feel good when I'm feeling down. It's a good day.
Yeah. Well, when you're feeling good, look at what Texas did this week to give itself the right to just throw out the votes in Houston.
Yes.
But talk about that. I haven't talked about that yet with everybody.
But you're right. It's Texas is well on its way to not being a small D democracy. It's trying really hard.
I want to ask you about something that's in our Constitution. A Constitution says that you can be a state, but to be a state in the United States, you have to have a Republican form of government, and they describe what it is. Some of our states are flirting with no longer being a Republican form of government. That's litigation that no one's ever looked at, and it's big and frightening. But people want to throw democracy away.
Very political.
Right?
Yeah, it's a dicey thing, though, because courts hate dipping into what they call political questions, and even though that's in the Constitution, debating what crosses certain lines there is generally regarded by courts as a political question. Oh, fun fact about me. I went to law school with Matt Gaetz of Florida's 1st District.
You have my deepest sympathies.
Thank you. Yes, he is a bad man. He was pretty anodyne back then. He was just your normal entitled, white guy whose parents are rich or whatever. But yeah, he's bad.
I like that word, anodyne. I like that word a lot. Yeah. It's not, by the way, for those of you who are listening, it's not one side of a battery. That's a different word. This word just means bland and not a problem, Yeah,
he was just another entitled white guy in law school, but got much. Honestly, if he hadn't run for the Florida State House, back in, I don't know, was it 2010, 2012, one of those, I would have forgotten he existed. But here we are.
Here we are. Well, so you're speaking to an audience mostly in the upper Midwest, and we talk about states, but again, Virginia's not been on our radar screen. What are the three most important things that we ought to know about Virginia? And, I'm in a state that is, fairly solidly blue, and people in Chicago all the time make decisions about, who do I get with swing left and I volunteer in this place, or I, send a check to the Wisconsin Dems. What do they need to know about Virginia?
What they need to know about Virginia is that there are a lot of ways to make a difference there, and a very direct difference, because a fun fact about Virginia is that in terms of campaign finance, it's a little bit Wild Westish. There are no everything in Virginia is full disclosure. I mean, whenever you donate, it's going to be posted online. It's full disclosure, full sunlight, but no limits. So, and coordination is completely legal. So, which actually kind of goes back to the 2016-17 thing when all these groups popped up and wanted to participate in state-led elections. They all got involved in Virginia in 2017, which was great. But then they wanted to get involved in other states the next year, and it was much more complicated because every state has its own set of campaign finance laws, its own election rules, et cetera. It's much more complicated than just being involved in a U.S. House race or playing by one set of rules there. But what they should know is that they should cut checks to Sister District is a great group that's very active in Virginia this year. I love those folks. They're very smart about how they deploy their resources and their money. The state party is run by Susan Swecker right now, who is very, very smart and has worked with state lawmakers there for years, has great relationships with them, and knows what it means to win a majority in the legislature. So the state party is a great place to send your resources if folks are interested in helping out, which Democrats definitely need help in Virginia. A lot of people got really disillusioned after Youngkin won, unfortunately. Everyone thought that Virginia was blue and everyone was happy, and then it wasn't, and then everyone got sad, even though I would argue it was never blue in the first place. But yes, state party, the state caucus, again, Sisters District, great group. DLCC is the party organization that elects state legislators all across the country, but of course, they're very focused on Virginia this year. It is not the only game in town. There are some other states, like New Jersey, with legislative elections, but no one's worried about losing the Democratic majority in New Jersey. Let's be real. So Virginia is the hottest game in town, and anyone who lives in a safely blue place who wants to help out should definitely take a really hard look at Virginia. A lot of great candidates there. This is the first election there after redistricting, so new districts for everybody. It's slightly Wild West-ish in terms of, like, you know, a lot of people are just everyone's running in brand new districts. No one's district has the exact constituents it had last time around. So
that's good. That's interesting.
It's a fun time. Yeah.
Yep.
So anyone who's an incumbent isn't actually an incumbent. They just have part of their old district a little bit.
Yep. That's always interesting. Really interesting. Okay, so that's Virginia, and I hope people who are listening, you know, if they're interested, you got a list here of ways to be helpful, and I'll tweet out some of them after. Let me go back to just get your take on Texas for 1 second, because while you and I are talking, their legislature is voting to abolish the Harris County election administrator, and that is, you know, Houston. They're giving the Republican, basically the equivalent of a Secretary of State, the right to say, you know what, I think there was something wrong, so we're going to throw out this election and redo it.
Yep.
I mean, I don't. This is
it's diabolical.
Really,
it's really sneaky.
Maybe you know, in sort of Jim Crow America, we had something like this, but now we didn't even. We had people not allowed to vote, but we've not had a situation where they just said, yeah, you can vote, but really, you know, F off. We don't care what your vote is, which doesn't matter. It's just a sham.
When the big anti-voting law passed there a couple of years ago, there were a lot of provisions in there people were very upset about. But one of the provisions that people didn't talk about, and this actually also happened in the big controversial Georgia election law as well. These Republicans are getting very, very clever. They hate that cities tend to be very progressive and democratic, even when a state is very Republican, and they really don't like cities having all this power. So this is in Georgia. The newish election law also allows the state to disband local election boards and replace them with people of their own choosing, and to question votes and challenge votes and throw out votes kind of at whim. And it is very small d democratic, and is going to get things in Georgia and Texas are going to get much worse before they get better. I'm so sorry. I hate saying that out loud, but because it makes me sad. But I think things are going to get worse before they get better in those places.
Well, I think things are going to get better everywhere. I think we've moved from... I
got my start in Virginia politics 20 years ago. I know things are going to get better. It's just going to take a long time and be really painful along the way.
I think we are moving from defense to offense everywhere now. And I think I mean, the coalition that's made up of people like you and like me who worry a lot about the democracy. That's not that big, but it's strong. The coalition of people who, the group of people who honestly, for whom reproductive choice is their most important issue, is huge. The coalition of people who are interested in civil rights, very big. Young people who care about the environment, huge. All of us have common cause here.
Yes. And the kids care. Man, the kids care like kids. I am not a Gen Zer. I am definitely a bit older. And the kids these days care. And I hate that they have to care so much. I feel like their lives should be much easier, but
not since the 1960s.
The Republicans are not going to get this generation of voters at all, ever. Like,
no, they are not.
They're using the youth, which is why they're trying to outlaw like voting on college campuses and whatnot. Like, they know the kids are not in their corner.
Yeah, there are over 5 million kids in college. There are over 5 million kids in college. There are over 5 million students in colleges who today are having their right to vote threatened by legislation. 5 million.
That's correct.
In states that matter, This is a dark time, but I think we get through it, and I hope we get through it before the Republicans actually light the match that they're holding over the burning, over the pyre that they've poured the gasoline on. Because if they actually throw the match in and decide they're going to just throw out everybody's votes, we're going to have a big fire for sure. They're the ones who are going to get swept away, but it's going to be ugly.
Right, but like people shouldn't have to go through that.
Totally agree. One civil war is enough for a country.
That's not how this should work. Right.
Yeah.
Things should not get worse before they get better, but they're going to get worse before they get better.
Well, that's got to be the last word, Carolyn. I really appreciate our conversation. I hope we do it again, and I hope that
I would like this. Not feel bad about it on such a down note.
No, it's all right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate catching up.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Yes, this is super fun. Thank you.
Yep. All right, everybody. That is Carolyn Fiddler, who covers state politics, focused on Virginia now for the Dogwood, but she is also a very, as you can tell, keen observer of what's going on in state legislatures around the country.